Welcome to Audit Archive, where we run you through some of the most questionable and rather atrocious police encounters. Today, we're looking at a case where two officers violated a man's rights and unlawfully searched his vehicle, even though he refused to give consent countless times. The officers are now paying the price for their actions. On 23 October 2020, Officer Marvell Tucker and Officer James McKenzie of the Daytona Beach Police Department were out on patrol duty when they witnessed a vehicle fail to stop at an intersection. Soon after this, both officers initiated a traffic stop and immediately approached the vehicle. The driver of the vehicle is 40-year-old Kerry Jarvis, who was heading home from a gas station and didn't realize that he had to come to a complete stop back at the intersection. The entire incident was caught on Officer McKenzie's body cam. As seen in the video, Officer Tucker made initial contact with Mr. Jarvis and promptly requested for Mr. Jarvis's license and registration.
Yes, sir.
In response to this, Mr. Jarvis handed both documents over to Officer Tucker and showed no signs of hesitation while doing so. In fact, Mr. Jarvis also compliantly answered any questions with regard to where he was coming from and where he was headed. Therefore, nothing seemed alarming about the traffic stop at all, and Mr. Jarvis did not give the officers any reason to stay on their toes either. While Officer Tucker returned to his patrol vehicle to verify Mr. Jarvis's identity and run him through the system, Officer McKenzie remained by the vehicle to keep an eye on him. Soon, both of them engaged in a casual conversation where Mr. Jarvis informed Officer McKenzie that he had been staying out of trouble and did not want any problems with anyone.
I've been staying out of trouble. I don't want no problems. I'm working, doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
When's the last time you got in trouble?
He went on to tell Officer McKenzie about his history with the law, stating that he served a total of 19 years in prison for drug-related crimes. However, Mr. Jarvis then emphasized that he now has his life sorted out, adding that he has 2 kids and works an honest job to support his family.
Actually, I went to jail when I first got out of prison, and then they dropped the charge because it wasn't mine anyway.
When'd you get out of prison?
9 months ago.
9 months ago. What'd you serve time for?
Selling drugs.
Selling drugs? What kind of drugs? What kind of drugs?
Crack.
During this conversation, Mr. Jarvis mentioned an important detail that presumably played a big role in this encounter. He claimed that he gets profiled and stereotyped regularly because of his appearance, referring to his tattoos and shiny accessories.
I just hate that I still gotta wear all this shit here and look like I get stereotyped, man. It's just me though. It's my look.
The events that take place later in this incident could possibly tie back to this. Despite Mr. Jarvis making it very clear that he did not indulge in any unlawful activity after being released from prison, Officer McKenzie appeared to be even more curious about his history. After asking about some of Mr. Jarvis's old charges, he asked him for the second time whether there were any weapons in his car.
No. What was that arrest for that they dropped, you said?
Possession.
Possession?
Yeah, but it wasn't me. It was like 3 people went to jail.
And again, there's no weapons, nothing listed in the vehicle, man.
Mr. Jarvis then replied with the same answer, stating that there were no weapons whatsoever. Officer McKenzie's increased curiosity was rather odd, and it seemed as if he was now trying to fish for something that could ensue some drama. Mr. Jarvis apparently caught on to this, and since it had already been a good few minutes of just sitting inside his car waiting for Officer Tucker, it made sense for him to feel like something was up. He stated that he didn't really do anything wrong, even though Officer Tucker had explained to him that he was supposed to stop at the intersection he drove through. He claimed that he simply didn't know better. Regardless, Officer McKenzie explained the traffic rules surrounding intersections in Volusia County, which was great, but the officer's intent to fish for anything he could use against Mr. Jarvis was still there.
Did he tell you why he pulled you over?
Yeah, I didn't stop at the little thing right there, coming out of the thing.
Oh yeah, when you're exiting private property,
didn't know that, though.
crossing a state sidewalk or city sidewalk onto a city roadway, you must treat it like an actual stop sign, coming to a complete stop and then proceeding into the intersection.
This was proven when out of nowhere, Officer McKenzie pointed out the accessories hanging from Mr. Jarvis's rearview mirror, claiming that it was illegal per statute to have any accessories that block the driver's view.
Also, you can't have this stuff hanging from your rear view. Because, I mean, per statute, it is illegal.
According to Florida Statute 316.2004, it stated that no person shall drive any motor vehicle with any sign, poster, or other non-transparent material upon the front windshield, side wings, or side or rear windows of such vehicle, which materially obstructs, obscures, or impairs the driver's clear view of the highway or any intersecting highway. Therefore, taking this into account, it could be argued whether the accessories hanging from Mr. Jarvis's rearview mirror were really that obstructive or not. But either way, it's pretty obvious that Officer McKenzie was just nitpicking at that point. A few minutes later, Officer Tucker finally returned to Mr. Jarvis and handed back the documents that were provided to him after informing Mr. Jarvis that he'd be given a warning for the traffic violation. Right after this, Officer Tucker asked Mr. Jarvis if there was anything in the car that he needed to be worried about.
Anything like here that I need to worry about?
In response, Mr. Jarvis promptly assured Officer Tucker that there was nothing as such. But despite this, Officer Tucker asked Mr. Jarvis if he could search the car. And what's worse is that he asked the same question twice and received the same answer both times, which was a clear no.
So you said we can't search the car? Okay.
Mr. Jarvis said that he had done nothing wrong and that the officers had no reason to suspect him of carrying anything illegal, so searching his car was out of the question. And he was right. The Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is designed to protect citizens from this exact situation, specifically unlawful searches and seizures by law enforcement, something which Officer Tucker was trying to do. In addition to this, when it comes to traffic stops, Florida law states that officers are within their rights if they have probable cause to do an inventory search of your car. It's also known that courts define probable cause as evidence noticeably present in the area of question. This evidence could include visible contraband or illegal items in plain sight, such as drugs or weapons on the dashboard or car seats, the smell of marijuana, alcohol, or other drugs coming from the vehicle, admission of guilt for a crime, like driving under the influence. In this case, however, it goes without saying that neither of the officers had probable cause to search Mr. Jarvis's vehicle. After Mr. Jarvis refused to consent to a search multiple times, Officer McKenzie stepped in to come up with a reason that would possibly allow him and Officer Tucker to search Mr. Jarvis's vehicle. Officer McKenzie alleged that Officer Tucker had noticed furtive movements inside the car while Mr. Jarvis was being pulled over.
While my partner was behind you and prior to activating his lights and sirens, he observed furtive movements, which is movements into certain areas. So we're gonna check where those movements were and only where those movements were, okay? Can you step out of the vehicle, please?
Now, it's to be noted that throughout this encounter, Officer McKenzie and Officer Tucker did not communicate with each other. So the question arises, how did Officer McKenzie know that Officer Tucker witnessed suspicious movement in the car? Well, this simply proved that both officers on the scene had malicious intentions and wanted to unlawfully exploit Mr. Jarvis, as they were clearly making stories up. Subsequently, both officers ordered Mr. Jarvis to step out of his car so that they could search only the driver's side area to make sure there was nothing illegal hidden from the officers. In response to this, Mr. Jarvis rightfully protested against the officers' harassment and refused to allow them inside his car.
Man, no, you can't search my car, man.
Get out of the car.
Then, while Mr. Jarvis was seated inside his car, he stepped on the pedal and attempted to drive off. However, both officers were in direct contact with the vehicle. Officer McKenzie held onto the driver's side door for a brief moment before being thrown off, and Officer Tucker remained inside the vehicle while grabbing onto the steering wheel. The car crashed into a ditch down the road seconds later, and Mr. Jarvis was held at gunpoint by Officer Tucker by the time Officer McKenzie made it there. While being handcuffed, Mr. Jarvis claimed that Officer Tucker tried to kill him by presumably controlling the steering wheel and driving him into the ditch on purpose. More units arrived on the scene, and Mr. Jarvis was patted down before being placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officer McKenzie's body cam footage shows the moment when he and Officer Tucker explained the entire ordeal to another officer.
The guy was making movements left and right. So we asked for consent, he said no, so we said get out of the vehicle.
On that day, Jarvis was taken into police custody for 3 serious criminal accusations, as stated in the charging affidavit. These charges include 2 instances of causing severe harm to a law enforcement officer, known as aggravated battery, as well as the act of fleeing in a manner that exacerbated the situation, which is referred to as aggravated fleeing. According to court records, he was held without bond and spent over a year behind bars after this incident. However, when Judge Sandra Upchurch reviewed the body cam footage, she ruled that Mr. Jarvis was unlawfully detained after his first denial of consent. Had officers allowed Mr. Jarvis to leave, as he was entitled to, no one would have gotten hurt. The injuries resulted from the officer's own illegal activity. As a result, the state dropped all charges against Mr. Jarvis, but that did not give him the justice he deserves, especially after spending over a year in jail. When asked why he hit the gas, Mr. Jarvis said that, "I didn't want to get yanked out of my truck," adding that, "I didn't know what they were doing. One grabbed me by my neck, and the other grabbed me by my leg." He also claimed that, in that one little blink of the eye, "I lost everything. I lost my house. I lost my vehicle. I lost everything." As expected, an internal investigation was launched by the Daytona Beach Police Department, and they found that Officer McKenzie had violated 3 departmental standards directives and was subsequently given a written reprimand. A department spokesperson added that Officer Tucker was terminated for another incident not involving Kerry Jarvis. On March 20th, 2023, Mr. Jarvis filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Daytona Beach, along with both of the officers involved. A settlement is yet to be agreed upon, and the legal process is currently underway on the date of this recording. Be sure to check out our previous video, where we cover another outrageous police encounter.